All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're digging into Reverend Daryl's fascinating theological breakdown of ancient biblical hospitality. Now, whether you grew up reading these texts or you're checking them out for the very first time, the way this source material unpacks the whole concept of welcoming the outsider, it's honestly incredible. We're going to see how these ancient mandates aren't just dusty historical footnotes, but actually give us a pretty radical framework for how we treat the people around us right now.
Which brings us to our first section, the ancient radical mandate. So Leviticus 19:34 drops this seriously powerful command: the foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Reverend Daryl points out that this ancient instruction was entirely about dismantling hierarchy. It's not just saying, hey, it's fine if outsiders live next door. No, it's saying you actually have to treat them as your own. They aren't just tolerated, they aren't just allowed, they are given the exact same standing as someone born right there inside the community. It completely erases that line between us and them.
And to truly get how revolutionary this was, you've got to think about the context. In the ancient world, foreigners were incredibly vulnerable. I mean, we're talking no land, zero legal protection, absolutely no voice. They were completely at the mercy of the locals. But this biblical command, it just shatters that cultural norm. It demands absolute equality. Reverend Daryl highlights that through this mandate, the message is crystal clear. There is absolutely no such thing as second-class humanity. It's not about pity, and it's not about charity. It's about equality that comes from a deep, foundational love.
Moving right along to Section 2, turning history into responsibility.
The text actually gives a very specific reason why they had to be so hospitable, and it's captured perfectly in Exodus 23:9. You were foreigners in Egypt. This command is deeply, deeply rooted in Israel's own historical memory. It serves as this constant reminder like, hey, you know exactly what it feels like to be the outsider. You know what it's like to be overlooked, mistrusted, pushed to the margins and far from home.
And this brings up what I think is Reverend Daryl's most brilliant point. God transforms memory into empathy and turns history into responsibility. The logic here is just so clear and moving, right? Because you remember your own past pain of being an outsider. You have a strict, non-negotiable responsibility to make sure you never repeat that pain in someone else's life. Empathy, in this context, isn't just a feeling. It actually becomes a rigorous spiritual discipline.
Let's look at Section 3, mandates for radical hospitality.
Because ancient hospitality wasn't just some warm, fuzzy feeling. It was a heavily integrated economic, legal, and social policy. Listen to this. They were ordered to literally leave food from their harvest for the foreigner. Their financial tithes designed to support those without land. They were legally bound to provide equal justice, meaning absolutely no bias between a citizen and an outsider in court. And it goes way beyond just basic survival. They were commanded to invite foreigners into their biggest festivals, their celebrations, and to include them fully in their worship. It was this whole comprehensive system of radical inclusion.
So how does this apply today? That's Section 4, widening your social circle.
The real crux of this is how we actually define a foreigner right now. It doesn't necessarily just mean someone from another country. A foreigner today is really anyone outside your usual social circle. It's someone outside your comfort zone or your familiar world who simply needs welcome and dignity. Reverend Daryl reminds us so beautifully here that belonging is a gift we're supposed to give, not some exclusive privilege we guard.
So, I want you to pause and actively reflect on this for a second. Who is the foreigner in your life right now? Who is that person, maybe at your workplace, maybe in your neighborhood, or just in your broader community, who sits right on the outside of your familiar circle? Who out there might be craving a welcoming hand, or just a sign that they are seen and valued as native-born in your heart?
If we want to actually put this into practice today, Reverend Daryl gives us a super clear, practical, three-part framework to reach neighbors outside our usual circles. Step 1. Open a door. Literally or metaphorically, open it up to someone outside your bubble. Invite them in. Step 2. Offer kindness without suspicion. That means actively dropping any sort of cultural superiority or that us-first mentality we all sometimes fall into. And Step 3. Release fear of the other. We live in a time where fear of the outsider is, let's be honest, very loud. Lines get drawn so quickly, but releasing that fear, that is the ultimate step in practicing real, practical, radical hospitality in your own neighborhood.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, an act of worship.
The source makes it incredibly clear that treating the outsider with dignity isn't meant to be some political or ideological talking point. It's actually a profoundly spiritual stance. Every single act of welcome is an act of worship that reflects divine love. It mirrors the way of Christ, who, as the texts say, welcomed absolutely everyone. tax collectors, Samaritans, Romans, you name it, anyone seeking grace. By welcoming the outsider, the text is saying you're actually participating in the very character of God.
And that leads us to this incredibly provocative, lingering thought from Reverend Daryl: every stranger we embrace becomes a neighbor. It's such a simple shift in perspective, right? But it has the power to completely change our communities. If we actually take this ancient mandate and apply it today, those walls of exclusion simply dissolve. So I'm going to leave you with this to think about. What specific door can you open this week to transform a stranger in your life into a true neighbor? Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I really hope this sparks some wonderful new connections in your own life.